Hey everyone, thank you very much for joining. Today we'll be discussing about the digital sustainability, the impact of digital technology on the greenhouse gas emissions. Um, so one of the uh, trends that we have that we see currently is the fact that people tend to digitize things, especially after COVID-19. We see that digital transformation became mainstream and people want to digitize everything. And what people do not realize on the other side is that there's a physical impact of digital technology, and it also enables the greenhouse gas emission. And one of the key facts that we have is that in 2020, digital as a whole was responsible for close to 3.5% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and which is almost the same as civil aviation. And according to some of the research, we see that this trend is set to increase by 6% each year. And can we still ignore this fact? The answer is clearly no. So we need to be reassessing and rethinking business strategies and implementation, especially from a digital transformation standpoint, to see what would be a better solution, and to how can we reduce this impact. This problem can be split into two sides. One from manufacturing side, where we see manufacturing of laptops, phones, or digital servers, which require huge amount of mining, supply chain, and also wastewater treatment and things of that sort, and which also has a contribution to the overall greenhouse gas emission. We see that it is close to 40%. And on the usage side, we see that all these technologies are heavily powered by electricity from non-renewable resources, and it also generates e-waste after use. So in all these contexts, we need to understand the broader picture. Digital transformation is good, but how do we ensure at the same time that we protect our planet? So today we have Bhavya, Alex, and Nicholas, and let's discuss this, and let's please feel free to chime in and give your thoughts on this topic, and let's see how we can address these problems in the long term, and also build solutions that are more sustainable in the future. Anybody who has got any thoughts can go ahead.
I think I'm happy to jump in. Thanks, Ronald, for those slides and that data. It's insightful. I think coming from the consumer tech space, I feel very guilty about how our industry is kind of contributing in a very negative way to the planet. Even though we want to talk about numbers, we are in the smartphone game, laptop game. We understand the impact it has on the environment. But then there's very less green solutions right now. Let's even talk about the aspirational brand, which is Apple. Even they haven't, pioneered the way in this space. It's a very difficult transition. Let's talk about it, because the fact is the traditional supply chain is the way it works. We have chip manufacturers who manufacture in a certain way, all the components coming from Sony, let's say the lenses and the battery, right? The supply chain is very conventional. There are a lot of innovations that are happening in this space, but not in the sustainable space. We are trying to, there are a couple of white papers which talk about how we don't have to put the battery and there can be a solar smartphone. We're talking about how the components can be recyclable, how we're going to talk about DIY, where we're just going to bring in components and consumers can make their own smartphone, which means they don't have to buy a new smartphone every year. There are certain kind of concepts, and these are all white paper yet. And yeah, we are lagging very much behind in the consumer tech, where I haven't seen anything great or game changing at this point, sadly.
I would like to be the devil's advocate, right? Are we sure we're discounting the opportunity cost? Part of digital transformation, one of the side effects at least is going paperless, right? I do think in the grand scheme of things, we are still better off in terms of using less paper, utilizing the space that will otherwise be used to store paper, etc. And we are living in a digital age where if we could utilize technology uh, to help us with a lot of workload, then perhaps there will be less travel as well. Certainly, digital transformation is one of the key things that happened after COVID. And if you look at a lot of listed companies, their expenses have actually dropped since COVID by virtue of people not traveling as much for work. And that I don't have the data in front of me, but I would imagine they are reducing carbon emission with less traveling.
I would agree with you, especially from a paperless world. It's as you rightly mentioned that we have reduced paper to a larger extent. It's one of the key aspects in most of the firms right now. But we also need to keep in mind that about the long-term impact of these solutions that we bring in. So while we suggest that there is an impact, but we also recommend the fact that we need to have more innovation, as Bhavya mentioned, about ensuring these batteries are recyclable, ensuring that these technology that is used to build digital transformation is altogether much more reusable. We're bringing in all these aspects of transformation to be sustainable. So I think while we should not stop digital transformation, as Nicholas recommends, but at the same time, we also need to have more innovation in this space, which enables the transformation to be much more cleaner in terms of environment. Especially, I think from the mining perspective, instead of digging deep for the metals, especially like rare earth metals for some of the components that we use, especially cobalt and nickel for the batteries. I think if we can innovate more from the technology perspective, especially the hardware perspective, I think there will be a lot more impact, and there will be lot more sustainable actions and governance which will be really nice from the planet perspective.
Yeah, I think yeah, thanks, Manoj. I think yeah, echoing what Nick said, I agree that at least in terms of the industry work wise, like the future of work, I'm seeing looks like I'm expecting a long-term shift in terms of remote work, because even when I came back to North America, I'm seeing that although things are opening up and like people can return to the office basically full time, a lot of employees are actually choosing to do remote work maybe 2 or 3 times a week actually. So it's actually, again, removing a lot of the transportation and a lot of the environmental costs for transportation and like between work and home. So that seems like it's at least reducing a lot of that impact when it comes to transportation, as well as meeting clients now with Zoom and with all of these communication tools. I do think that the need for travel actually has been reduced significantly, and it's also like an expense that it has been lowered like significantly for companies. So I do think that's something that I think has a long-term impact, and it's quite significant if you look at previously pre-pandemic, that traveling I think has been excessive to say the least. I think people were like traveling at least for work every, like if you're depending on the industry of course, but almost like every other day people would be flying to different places, and it was always questioning whether it was needed, but it was almost just part of like, oh, I had to meet the client face to face. But nowadays, if it's small issues or something that can be solved, within like a 20-minute conversation, maybe it doesn't need to be done face to face. Obviously, there are other areas where maybe like face-to-face interaction and like the digital tools may not obviously be a one-to-one replacement, but I do think it has eased a lot of the burden when it comes to that. And then, like you say, when it comes to consumer products, I do think a lot of it may be down to education. I know when it comes to like cell phones and such, I think it's already quite advanced where, I think that like people already said like for iPhones, like a lot of the like chips can actually like can be used for more than 5 years. Like the software updates and everything, actually the phones can last more than 5 years. Just that people, and unfortunately these brands like Apple keep kind of marketing the product to buy new phones every like 2 to 3 years, which is not necessary. Like I think even like back like iPhone like 6 or like I still actually updated. So people who have iPhone 6 actually get new updates and they work as a phone actually. So it really depends on your needs. Like if you really, I think it's a part of an educational change for consumers, because I do think the technology is already quite advanced. I just think consumers have to just change their buying habits.
Absolutely. You rightly mentioned that consumer behavior has to change. And also Alex, you would agree that we learned a lot about Patagonia when it comes to repair. I think such innovation can also be implemented. You don't have to really innovate technology, but also you can innovate behavior and incentivize consumer behavior, especially the right to repair. And I think, as we move to a modern economy where things are getting, the growth is huge. I think the economic growth is decoupled from the resource use, and there is money to be made in focusing on the longer life cycles of the product, especially refurbishment and design to repair, ensuring that the economy is not just linear but much more circular. So I think these are the aspects from a behavioral standpoint. I think we need to have, which can change a lot of consumer behavior. I think Bhavya also would agree with this, because we had a very similar discussion, especially from the fashion industry, where we saw that consumer behavior is also very much, central or a core theme that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I think
you go ahead first.
So I think Alex is right on where he said that consumer education is so important. Like when Renald shared that link with me 2 days ago, we spoke about digital sustainability, and I read and I realized how much just watching a Netflix show and sending an email with certain megabytes can actually contribute to the carbon imprint. So consumers don't realize the activities that they do online is also creating such a huge impact into the planet, as simple as Bitcoin, NFT, and the blockchain technology itself is also creating, having a very negative impact. It's not very sustainable. So I think consumers need a lot of education in this space. Like, I don't know how much my internet usage is kind of like, what is my carbon imprint personally? So if that kind of awareness is created, consumers can be more conscious as to how they consume data, how they consume internet, how do they consume consumer tech products.
I think we're moving towards a post-materialistic world. Actually, at least I find that the more educated you are, the least reliance one would be on materialistic goods, and by extension, overconsumption. I think we are getting into that stage, even though if you talk about fashion, there's this ultra real-time fashion like Shein that's getting prominent. But for example, in the menswear world, like people are going back to the basics. Like they are, I think that you are seeing more and more people actually try to wear clothing that fits instead of trends. They're learning to look after what they wear. Previously, you would just chuck the stuff after a season or two. You're now learning. I recently learned a word called patina. I think people are really it's a highly popular word these days, and people don't mind patina. People don't mind pre-owned goods or pre-loved goods as well. I think there's you're seeing increasing acceptance to that. Certainly, there are secondary markets that are growing more and more prominent. So I think we're starting to see that consumption for goods, but we're not seeing that for consumables such as computers yet. So it's about perhaps shaping the narrative that consumer goods can be like luxury goods.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, yeah, that's true. Even I have not seen that trend transfer into the tech space where clothing is okay. People rent, lease out clothing that they don't use. I think, Ronald, you shared it in the last sharing. Yeah, in consumer tech, nobody wants to share anything. The gadgets are very private and personal because of the data protection, stuff like that. But if we can incorporate where leasing can be an option, that is good, yeah. I remember Apple did that announcement, didn't they? Like they said they'll lease out devices. It'll be contract basis. They just did an announcement last month.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, let me share. Let me find that.
Sure. In the meanwhile, I just wanted to ask Nicholas, because Nicholas talks a lot about recycling. I just want to ask your thoughts on the e-waste and recycling e-waste, and how do you think? What are your opinions on that? And could you share some insights?
Locally or internationally?
I think both. I mean, you can talk about local or international. I think what were your opinion insight? Yeah.
These days, Hong Kong there is a problem with Hong Kong with recycling because it is such a small market in the grand scheme of things, and because of some change policies, you no longer get to ship these let's just say rubbish, right, into China. So you can't, the cost of recycling has to be done in Hong Kong, and therefore it would be quite high. And recyclers aren't sustainably built, meaning they do require government support, they do require fundings, and they can't operate independently in a profitable way, which hinders how they expand their operation or how they cater to the needs. Obviously, the Hong Kong government's way of tackling that, I think you're seeing that with electronic goods, is that they are charging for the disposal. So its side effect is quite simple and quite effective in that it's actually not about recycling, it's about reducing. So by charging for the disposal of personal computers, they're hoping that it will make people think twice before switching computers, switching mobile phones, etc. I think reduction is certainly a way to go, and that ties back to what we talked about just then, which is changing consumer behavior.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. Like, consumer behavior plays a really great role. Yeah. Alex, do you have any insights from Canada? How do you see this trend play out, especially from the consumer part? Would you like to share some insights?
Sure. I mean, when it comes to recycling, I mean, we do have a recycling program in Canada. So it's already been, I think, been part of like the country system for like over like 20 years. But again, I do think even with recycling being implemented, I think it's obviously still an issue with I think Canada still has is one of the largest exporters of landfill in the world still. So you can see that even with the recycling program, it's still not 100% fixed for anything. I don't think anything is, right. I think it's supposed to be a small step, towards a cleaner environment, hopefully a more reusable environment. But it's not 100% fixed. I think when it comes to recycling, it's actually find it very maybe Nick can tell more, but it's quite detail oriented. It's not as easy as it's plastic that goes into recycling. There's something about there's different plastics. Because I know in Canada, when we do recycling, there's certain plastics that are not recyclable actually. So it's not, sometimes even I get confused. I think it's plastic and I just throw in recycling, but I realize actually that cannot be recycled actually. And a lot of it, because it goes into a separate system, if it gets mixed up, it could actually, break a sort of machine, or it could cause issues. And so a lot of times I think, all of it, if it gets contaminated in a sense, when it goes to recycling, it actually just all goes to landfill anyways because of the mix-up. So again, it is education, because people, even for me, sometimes when walking on the street, I just think, oh, this, I'll just throw it in I don't know. Sometimes I hold something and I just throw it in the garbage because I don't know if this is recyclable or not. And again, glass, plastics, cardboard, paper, styrofoam, all of it is kind of its own. It's all recyclable, but they all have to be recycled responsibly in a sense. So it is a whole other educational topic in itself, recycling. But I don't know obviously too much about what happens after I dispose of it, because once I put it into recycling and the city takes it away, I don't know how it's being recycled after that. I would love to learn more about that. How it's being recycled and how our products, because I think a lot of times once I dispose of something, it's kind of magically gone in a sense. I don't know what happens after.
I think these are really good conversations. One side we can repair things, and the other side we're talking about recycling. And the other dimension is about designing the product itself to suit one of these needs based on what we see. So that is exactly where we need to talk about the innovation part. How innovative can we be in terms of product design, keeping all this in mind? And we see a lot of improvements positively. I think moving forward, I'm very positive that we'll be able to take this on a positive side. And also innovation in the tech space, especially from the hardware perspective, I think will be central theme. And I think that's my takeaway from this. And you guys can share your thoughts.
I think just to add up on the question that you had run out on how markets are kind of, taking care of the waste. Something that I've seen in the UK is they're very clear about how the waste is segmented. So I happened to speak to one of them. There's a huge company which kind of takes care of waste segmentation. So they're very clear when they pick up things from their home. So the wet they try to make it as a fertilizer. They try to make plastic. They try to recycle it in a smart way. And they work with startups where they provide clean materials. So there is something really that's happening substantially in the UK where they take care of waste. I heard also in Japan, they're very serious about how waste is converted and, the landfill is taken care because the country is too small, right? So these countries who are very small, they're very thoughtful about how waste is segmented and how they're putting it back into the environment. And something that I have seen from just on digital sustainability, I think something is very interesting is how Google has committed saying in 2023, they'll go, they have a target saying they'll go neutral, in 2030, sorry. And then the question is how they are doing this. So Sundar Pichai was interviewed by Bloomberg, and he said few things that we are trying to do is they have a sustainability officer, they have a team which are trying to see how the tools and the equipments and the infrastructure they're building, how it could be, the infrastructure can be shared across different platforms, and how people are asked, when they send a certain email, can that be cut down and can they do face-to-face conversation? They're encouraging people to come back to office and have those conversations rather than sit and send emails across the board. So he said it's very difficult to go carbon neutral, but he is going to put his team behind it, and Google is going to take a lot of initiatives in order to make this work.
Yeah, that's nice. Good. Nicholas, do you have any final thoughts on this?
Not quite. I think recycling is a big topic. We can't finish. Especially the challenges recyclers face and different types of recycling. We can go into the details, or even organize site visits. But that's probably for another day.
Sure. Thank you guys, thank you very much. I think we had a really great discussion and hope we see some positive change. Thank you very much, and thanks for your time today.
Great.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a good
Nicholas.
Friday
Thanks,
night,
Ronald.
Friday morning. Yeah, bye for now.
Bye guys, take care.